This is part 6 of World's Scariest Prisons. Squirrel Cage Jail. Imagine a series of cages that spin like a giant lazy Susan, with metal bars rising 3 stories high. Are these cages for lab animals? A place for keeping zoo creatures? No. This was a place for keeping humans, the historic Pottawatomie County Squirrel Cage Jail in Council Bluffs, Iowa. The jail was built like a revolving door. 3 stories of 10 steel cage-like cells revolve around a central axis. The exits are pie-shaped and together form a big cylinder like a larger cage. The jailer could operate a hand crank that rotated the cells until they lined up with a door opening. Behind the bars, also known as Pottawatomie County Jail, located in Council Bluffs, Iowa, operational 1885 to 1969, number of prisoners 3 stories of the prison each held 10 pie-shaped cells for prisoners. Notable inmates, the first superintendent of the jail, J.M. Carter, is said to haunt the prison. I've actually been to Squirrel Cage Jail, and I will tell you it's very creepy, and it does feel like there's just like something following you the entire time, which I don't know if that was just because I had heard the story and then like manifested that, but like it is really scary. Pay the price. The building also contained officers, a kitchen, and quarters for women, as well as an apartment for the jailer and his family on the 4th floor, though none of those rooms revolved. The Squirrel Cage Jail, which cost $30,000 to build, was invented in 1881 by 2 Indianapolis men who received a patent for its design. Their goal, they declared on their patent application, was to reduce personal contact between the prisoners and the jailer. They wanted to allow the jailer to be able to pay minimal attention while still providing maximum security. 1 jailer and 1 deputy should be able to control the entire jail. The Squirrel Cage Jail is the only 3-story revolving jail ever built, though there are 2 other revolving jails still standing, a 1-story jail in Gallatin, Missouri, and a 2-story jail in Crawfordsville, Indiana. The Squirrel Cage Jail doesn't rotate anymore, but it still looks much as it did when it closed in 1969. Today, visitors can tour the jail. Prison jobs. Most inmates in modern prisons don't spend all day in their cells. Many prisoners, especially those who are considered minimum security, work at jobs within the prison. Some might help to run different parts of the prison itself, cook or clean in the kitchens, serve in the cafeterias, check out the shelf books in the prison library, or do laundry. Some prisoners do jobs that serve the outside community, such as picking up trash by the road or working on a prison-run farm. Others might help with the construction of prison buildings. Sometimes inmates work at manufacturing jobs right in the prison itself, such as sewing t-shirts, making license plates, or building office furniture. These jobs help keep the prisoners busy and often help them develop new skills that they may use when they are released. I do highly recommend going and seeing this jail. This is the only one in the book that I'm pretty sure I've gone to. But it is really cool. Coloma Gulag Camp. Imagine performing hard labor outdoors in little clothing day after day, year after year, in one of the coldest places on earth. That was life in the Gulag forced labor camp at Coloma. The Soviet government purchased a gulag, a system of hard labor camps to punish and imprison convicted criminals, petty lawbreakers, intellectuals, and prisoners of war. Behind the bars, also known as the Gulag, located in Serbia, Russia, operational 1929 to 1953, number of prisoners more than 18 million people were imprisoned at Coloma while it was used as a labor camp. Notable inmates were Mikhail Kruvik, Ukrainian mathematician. I'm probably going to pronounce all of these words wrong because they're in a different language that I have never studied. The camps. The Gulag camps were established under the rule of Joseph Stalin and flourished during the 1930s and 1940s, with many camps closing or easing conditions somewhat after Stalin's death in 1953. Coloma was known as the harshest of these camps. Life at Coloma. Coloma was in Serbia, one of the coldest inhabited places on earth. This gulag camp was so remote that it couldn't be reached over land. Prisoners were sent by train to the Pacific coast where they waited for the rivers to thaw. Then they journeyed inland past Japan and up the Coloma River to the camp. The trip was brutal and many died along the way. Prisoners at the Coloma camp performed hard labor, up to 15 hours a day, hacking at the frozen ground with pickaxes or cutting down trees. They mined coal, gold, and copper by hand, inhaling dangerous fumes. In unheated, crowded barracks, prisoners were given little more than soup and bread to eat, and many experienced slow starvation. There were fences around Coloma, but they were not necessary. Nature's extreme cold was stronger than any man-made barrier. Prisoners joked darkly that Coloma was a place where 12 months of the year were winter and all the rest were summer. It is, really scary to think about. Today, the number of prisoners in the camps gradually declined in the 1970s to fewer than 10,000. The very last prisoners were released in the 1990s. Today, the Gulag camp at Coloma is in ruins, with only rusting tools and rotting fence posts remaining to remind us of the people who suffered there. Who was sentenced to the Gulag? From 1929 to 1953, historians estimate that 18 million people passed through the Soviet Gulag. These included people from all ethnic groups, nationalities, and religions. No one was excluded. The government used the people in the labor camps to do large-scale labor projects, such as mining, so it was in their interest to send as many people to the camps as possible. Those who opposed the Soviet government were sent alongside dangerous criminals. Innocent people could be arrested and sent to the camps for even the mere suspicion of treason. Men and women could be sent for crimes as small as stealing bread from a restaurant or even simply missing work without an excuse. The accused would be convicted in a 5-minute trial and then sentenced to years in the hard labor camps of the Gulag. Imagine just, missing work once and then having your entire life, thrown away. You better hope that you remember to call out. Alcatraz. Alcatraz, also known as the Rock, was operational for only 30 years between 1934 and 1963. But this prison, which was built on an island in San Francisco Bay, is known best as the prison that housed Al Capone and other famous gangsters. Alcatraz was a military prison from 1961 until 1933 when it became a federal prison. The population was strictly maximum security prisoners, such as people who caused trouble in or tried to escape from prisons. Behind the bars, also known as the Rock Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, located in San Francisco Bay, California, operational 1934 to 1963. Number of prisoners, approximately 1,500 prisoners over 30 years. Notable inmates: Al Capone, gangster; Robert Stout, the Birdman of Alcatraz; George Machine Gun Kelly Barnes, gangster; Bumpy Johnson, mob boss. The Rock. The island itself is a barren rock with no natural water or vegetation. Escape from Alcatraz was difficult, if not impossible, and yet 14 attempts were made over its 30-year history. Some inmates were captured, others drowned. There were no sharks in the water around the prison, as many believed, but the water was extremely cold. It was thought no one could survive the swim. Daily life. Alcatraz is perhaps one of the most famous prisons in popular culture. In reality, however, the conditions there were no better than in many other prisons at the time. Alcatraz was never filled to capacity, much less overcrowded. Only one man was kept to each cell, which was unusual for this period. Each day's structured routine was intended to control the population and to teach them to follow rules. Prisoners were not tortured, and they were adequately fed, clothed, and given medical care. Okay, I did not know that sharks were not around the island. Maybe that's just because I'm stupid. I even went and, saw Alcatraz from a distance. I went to California with my family. Still, no idea that there weren't sharks. Military prison to national park. Alcatraz's operational costs were 3 times greater than any other federal prison. Every supply, including water and food, had to be ferried by boat from the mainland. Because of these costs, the government closed Alcatraz after only 3 decades. Today it lives on as a national park where visitors can explore the empty cells and listen to tour guides' tales. Famous prisoners at Alcatraz. Alcatraz is legendary not just for its unique location, but also for its famous prisoners. The 1930s gang Gangster George Machine Gun Kelly Barnes was one of the most famous criminals of the Prohibition era, the period in the United States when alcohol was outlawed. After a year spent smuggling liquor, Kelly and his wife kidnapped a wealthy businessman and held him for ransom. Kelly was eventually arrested and sent to the Rock in 1934. A more recent gangster, James Whitey Bulger, cycled through Alcatraz after he committed a series of bank robberies and was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison in 1956. Bulger was convicted of 11 murders in 2013 and was given 2 life sentences. Okay, he murdered 11 people but only got 2 life sentences? Apparently I don't know much about the prison system. Alcatraz is also home to oddball inmates such as convicted murderer Robert Stroud, otherwise known as the Birdman of Alcatraz. Beginning in 1942, Stroud spent 17 years in the prison after spending 3 decades at another federal prison. During his lifelong incarceration, Stroud bred and studied canaries in his cells, eventually writing 2 books on the birds and even concocting medicines to treat their diseases. That's really cool. Hollow Prison. I was at the Hanoi Hilton. That's how many American prisoners of war sarcastically referred to the Hollow Prison in Hanoi, Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, American POWs were sent to the isolated and brutal Hollow, where they were often beaten, shackled, and kept in solitary confinement. This treatment was a strategy designed to force prisoners to reveal American war secrets. The POWs were kept in isolation but would secretly talk to one another through cracks under the doors or tap codes on the walls to communicate. Behind the bars, also known as the Hanoi Hilton, located in Hawaii, Vietnam, operational 1964 to 1973 as a prison for American POWs. Number of prisoners, 2,000 inmates in 1954 alone. That's before the prison was operational. I wonder if they, made a typo. Notable inmates. John McCain, Senator, Republican candidate for the 2008 presidential election. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher this. Nguyen Chi Ten, Vietnamese activist and poet. James Stockdale, vice presidential candidate. Good lord. A lot of presidents. Or not presidents, presidential candidates. The true story. One famous former inmate of Hollow is U.S. Senator John McCain, who was held there after his plane was shot down in 1967. He recalls that his cell was 6 feet by 3 feet and he slept on a mattress stuffed with straw. In spite of the terrible conditions at Hollow, the Vietnamese government publicly stated that no soldiers were treated well. The government tried hard to control the world's understanding of life at Hollow and released pictures of prisoners eating a Christmas dinner and claimed they were allowed to play sports like volleyball. They even forced prisoners to write public letters proclaiming the great quality of life at Hollow. Most of Hollow Prison was demolished in 1993 and the new buildings were constructed on its site, but one old wing remains, standing as a reminder of the wartime era. The world's best prison? If there's a good place to be imprisoned, Halden, a high-security prison in Norway, might be it. Prisoners at Halden have spacious cells with desks, carpets, and flat-screen televisions, and personal bathrooms. Comfortable lounges are spaced out between every 10 cells. Prisoners at Halden can play basketball, jog on wooden trails, scale the rock-climbing walls, and take cooking classes. They even prepare their own dinner in small shared kitchens. Guards eat and socialize with prisoners to encourage good behavior. Inmates can have their teeth fixed in the state-of-the-art dentist office and record music in the prison recording studio. 3 Halden inmates even appeared in the Norwegian version of American Idol. Art and brightly painted walls help reduce the institutional feel of the building. And prisoners don't stay as long. The maximum sentence for any crime in Norway, even murder, is 21 years. Many in the United States might feel that these luxuries serve the opposite purpose of incarceration, but the Norwegian attitude towards imprisonment seems to work. Released inmates in Norway are reincarcerated only 30% of the time, compared to American inmates who are reincarcerated about 65% of the time. That's exactly what I was talking about in one of the earlier parts. That, like, you gotta treat people like people.